Hey gang, Private Jack here. I thought I'd do a quick addendum to the How to Rig a Simple Airplane series that I did, just to show you how to do one of these aircrafts in a real world type situation. Um, I didn't upload my box model anywhere, so people are asking me, well, where can I get models to actually do the process on to learn and practice? Well, I went to a website. It's called TF3DM, and I'm going to bounce back here. And on this website, there are a ton of aircraft models that you can pick and choose from, and download and play with. Okay, so this is the model here that I actually picked to do that second time-lapse video on. And the reason why I picked this is because it came in two formats that are friendly to Blender. That's 3DS and OBJ. C4D, I haven't found an actual importer to import C4D files. And if a model has a Max or any of the Maya extensions, I have not found an importer that will import a .max or a Maya extension into Blender. If you know of one, please let me know. Anyway, this is the model I picked. I downloaded it. I'm not going to load it into Source Filmmaker because it has a personal use license on it. So that's your answer to that question. It was uploaded by PB Designs about 2 years. PB Design about 2 years ago, and thank you for uploading your model and letting us play with it. Okay, so now that I've got that done, I've got the model in Blender, and we're going to look at some of the pitfalls of using someone else's model. So here's the model, and I've got it set up. I've done all the boning and everything else to it. First thing you're going to notice is that the model is not symmetrical. Okay, this wing is straighter than this wing, and that's one of the problems that you're going to run into. One of the pitfalls of using someone else's model is that you're prone to the modeler's um, capabilities, the way that he does his models, the knowledge that he has in creating his models. If we go in here and we look at some of these vertexes, there's vertex splits and all the rest of that. So need a little bit of work to actually get it in to work. Okay, so looking at the aircraft, I've got it rigged, and you're going to notice that my bones are on angles. Well, using the process, what you can do is you can use that, get into edit mode, you can use the x-axis mirror to actually place your bones left and right on the aircraft the way that I do in the video. But when it comes time to actually go through and edit them into position, you have to turn that X mirror off and position each bone individually, especially on an asymmetrical model like this, where one bone is farther behind the other and it has a slightly different angle and that kind of thing. Because if you use the mirror, what's going to happen is whatever you do to the bone on the left, it's going to happen to the bone on the right. Whatever you do to the bone on the right, it's going to happen to the bone on the left. Okay, so that's a pitfall. Asymmetrical, turn off the X mirror when actually placing and rigging the bones into position. Use it to place and rough in the bones, but get rid of it when you go to actually get the bones to work with the model. Okay, that's that. So, other thing was under the wing here, the landing gear was way over here into the second white stripe, war stripe, and the actual landing gear door was split away from the landing gear. So there's going to be some modeling work that you're going to have to do with the model. In the case of this, the model is not perfectly straight. As you can see, the fin is off to the left-hand side of, the left-hand side of the y-axis line, but the tail is pretty much center. So that's another problem that you're going to run into. You could fix this up by taking and deleting the entire right-hand side of the aircraft, or whichever side is straightest, select and then applying a mirror modifier to the side that was left over and making it symmetrical. That's one way of getting around it. Okay, now this model, I would have to do a lot more editing and whatnot else if I was going to upload it, and I told you I wasn't. I'd have to add a canopy, the windscreens, fix up the rotation, the roundness of the wheels. Up here in the prop, I'd have to fix up some of this as well. The way that he's got this prop on here, I've done the offset on the actual spinner bone, but it is so badly out of alignment on that straight line that the model clips. It doesn't matter what I do to try and fix it so that it doesn't. So that would have to be done. What else? Here, in the actual model itself, when you bring the model in, the ailerons are part of the wing. I had to split them out and make them their own separate object. But other than that, that was pretty much, the canopy I had to split into its own object so that I could move it. When I actually tried to move the canopy, I found that these vertices were connected to the fuselage, and the whole fuselage moved when I tried to pull the canopy back. Okay, so that's some of the pitfalls of the actual model itself. Let's get into pitfalls when actually importing the model. I guess I should mention also is that I included bones so that I could actually take and fire the missiles off one by one and do the wonderful drop tank thing away from the aircraft. Okay, so each of these have their own bone. I had to split the model out to its own object so that I could move it by itself. And the drop tanks were part of the wing, and I had to separate them out. So that was basic modeling that I had to do to the model to get it to work. Okay, now importing. I've got 2 sessions of Blender here, and we're going to look at the 2 formats that I brought in. Okay, we're going to look at the OBJ file, and we're going to look at the 3DS file. Come in here to ortho mode. The first one we're going to work with is the OBJ. Before I start, what I want to do is I want to make sure that the plugin to import OBJs and 3DS are turned on. So I go into user preference. Here in the search bar, I type OBJ. Okay, and this is the actual OBJ importer that we're going to be using, the Wavefront OBJ format. And this is a native program to Blender, so it's available right out of the box. All you have to do is come in here and make sure it's checked on. The other one is 3DS. Again, 3DS format is a Blender native plugin. You don't have to download any other plugins. All you have to do is come into the user pref, make sure it's checked on. So now that I know they're on, if I want to make sure that they stay checked on, I'll save my user settings and close off the user preference. Now that that's done, I'm going to File, Import, and here are those 2 formats, the Wavefront OBJ and the 3ds Studio Max format. Remember, .max and Maya, I don't know of a plugin available to Blender to bring in those 2 formats. So if you've got any of those type of files and don't have a plugin, throw them away. They're useless to you. First one we're going to work with is the OBJ. I'm going to go into that Mustang folder, and there's the OBJ file. And down here in the tool menu of the importer, you're going to find some switches and toggles that you can turn on and whatnot else. I'm going to leave them in their current state for now. And I'm going to show you the first pitfall you're going to fall into when you import this model. Click on Import, and I'm looking at my scene and I don't find a model. Okay, I know that I've got objects in the scene because they're here and each one has an origin point, but where is the model? Well, depending on how the author actually saved the model is either way down here on the floor, so small that you can't see it, or if I scroll out, I find it sitting way up here in space and it looks like it's an incomplete model. What this is a clipping thing with the work camera. The camera can only see so much. Okay? To fix this, come over here into your tool panel or your transform panel. You can either click that plus sign or press the N key. I should turn on screencast keys while I'm here. There we go. Turn it up and turn that up. Now you'll be able to see my keystrokes. Okay. N, we'll open and close that panel. Then up here in the clipping area, what you have to do is you have to increase the amount of area that the camera can see. See this? As I scroll that number up, more the plane becomes visible. Okay? I found with this particular model, I had to go up to about 6,000. Okay? The entire model comes into view, and as I back off, the plane is not going to clip out. Any smaller than that, say 3,500, as I scroll, oh, it's not going to do it for me this time. But I found that as I scrolled out, the plane would disappear. Okay, now, what can we do to fix this? This model is absolutely huge because the actual work area is way the heck down here. You've got two options. One is by pressing A, select the entire object, then press S and scale it back down onto the floor. I managed to do an upside down view here. Scale it and see if we can flip it back up again. There we go. Okay, you can scale it down onto the floor and get it there that way. Or I'm going to delete this object and I'm going to re-import it. I'm making sure that my cursor is in the center. Shift S, cursor to center. I'm going to re-import that file, only this time instead of leaving these at their default settings, this clamp size here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to 10. Okay, I'm not going to touch any of the other things beyond the scope of this video, but setting that to 10, what is going to happen is when you import your object now, it's going to be clamped to that size and it's going to show up right off the bat. So my clipping, I can turn that back down to 100 and I can still see my airplane because it's here on the floor and it's visible. Now what you have to do is you have to sit here and you have to play with the rotations. Okay, as you can see, location rotations are kind of like okay, so you have to play with the rotations and center this thing so that you've got the y-axis and the x-axis dissecting the aircraft down the center of the aircraft. Basic modeling stuff. Okay, that's the OBJ. That's the problem with importing OBJ files. I'm going to kill this one off and open up this one, and now we're going to look at the 3DS model. Import, 3DS is turned on. Go back into that P51 Mustang folder, grab the 3DS file. Again, you've got tools here. I'm going to leave them at the default, and we're going to press the 3DS import. And this is the way your model is going to show up. Okay, and you can see that the origin points are moved away from the center. Now, I tried doing the select all using the A and then doing the shift selection to cursor thing, and nothing moved. However, I found that, and then I went through and I individually picked up each individual object and used the shift thing. Okay, but I found that by selecting objects one at a time so that they're all selected, okay, let's just make sure we've got everything selected here now. Oh, I don't have the main body selected. So I can either click it here. I'm holding down the shift key as I right click on an actual object. Or I could come over here and I could, I've got everything selected by the looks of it. I can tell it's selected because there's a little orangish circle around the vertex indicator. But I'm going to turn off that fuselage again. I see here the hull doesn't have that orange circle. I can hold down the shift key and I can select the hull here as well. Okay, now that I've got them all selected individually, I do the shift selection to cursor and they all fall back to together again. I must have unchecked that one. Shift selection to cursor. So the model is now back together again. The origin point is in the center, but I've got this weird rotation happening to the aircraft. This is probably the author put the aircraft into a pose before he saved the 3ds Max file, and well, this is the pose it was in, or has something to do with the way that the actual model was saved. What I can do now is I can come into the transform menu, and if I select each individual object and have a look at the actual rotation, I find that they're all rotated by a certain amount. Now we're going to try something here. We're going to go through, we're going to use the menu here, the outliner, and we're going to select each of these by holding down the shift and clicking on an object. Method. And we're going to try and rotate the aircraft back to 0 by changing the value in the rotation transform menu. And I think we're going to find that only one object, and that's the last active object, is going to move. In this case, the last object was the rudder, and the rudder moved. So that's no good to us. I'm going to Control Z out of that, turn on screencast keys again, 80 and 80. So now that I have these all individually selected, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to look at the value that's here. X is at a minus 57.161 degree rotation. If I come in here and press R and X and type the positive value of that particular rotation, 57.161, what that should do is almost zero out. I must not have had the prop selected. Okay. Rotate X 57.161. That is going to rotate the aircraft almost to it should have actually rotated the aircraft to a 0 degree rotation, but it didn't. And what you have to do now is do pretty much the same thing, Make sure all your objects are selected. And what we're going to do is we're going to rotate the Y now. It's a positive 27.646. I'm going to type in there RY negative 27.646. That's going to rotate it onto the floor and still leave me with a little bit of a rotation. And then on the Z, I'm going to type in the positive value, 17.487. So rotate Z 17. Let's back out of that. Rotate Z 17.487. And why did that happen? Rotate Z 17.487. That actually rotated it back to 0. Now I can sit here and I can play with that all day and try to rotate it back into an actual good position. So Y, rotate on the Y. Rotate on the Y. Negative 1.395. That rotated it to 0, and now a negative 4.119. Rotate on the x-axis. Rotate on the x-axis, negative 4.119. Now the rotations are back to 0. If I look at the actual model now on the ground, it's not quite there yet. So I have to do some manual rotations to get it to the point that the aircraft is located on the ground. So I'm going to rotate on the x-axis a little bit to try and get these wheels up. I'm holding down shift and rotating to slow the rotation method down. Look at it from the front. I have to rotate it on the y-axis now just a little bit to get those wheels straightened up. Look at it from the top view now, rotate on the z-axis to try and straighten the front and the rear of the plane out. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and dissect the aircraft on the Y, and looking from the front, and on the Z-axis. Oops, grab the wrong one. There, no, it likes to grab that Z. So that the airplane is pretty much dissected right down the center on that Y and Z axis. Once I have the aircraft in position, I'm going to apply the location. That's going to move the origin points for all the selected objects back to the 0 point on the actual scene floor. And I'm going to apply my rotations and scale to get everything into a 001 aspect. Okay, so now I'm ready to start working with this model. And right off the bat, we can see the right side is straight, or the left side is straighter than the right side. The tail is slightly offset from the center. The elevator and stabilizer have that same asymmetrical look to it from the right side of the aircraft. And here I can see that if I skinned up the aircraft underneath, the landing gear are way over here when the actual door is here. Looking at the front, there's that angle on the landing gear door that I told you about that I had to fix. But the model is pretty much ready to go. Now, when actually laying the bones, like I said, to actually position the bones after setting the aircraft up, pull it back on the Y. I'm going to place the cursor in the center, Shift S, cursor to center. I'm going to change my pivot mode to 3D cursor and rotate the aircraft so that it's pretty much straight as if it was in flight. Okay, so now I'm ready to start laying out my aircraft. Come into the top view, go into the side view, go into the front view, have a quick look, and place your first bone. Armature, single bone. And now you're off to the races. Scale that. Extrude the fuselage bone, extrude Z. Disconnect the bone. Pull that one up into the fuselage. Go into side-on view. Turn on X-ray mode, armature X-ray mode, so you can see your bones. There it is there. I'm going to grab it. I want it at the center of gravity where the aircraft is actually going to pivot in the air, probably right about there. And turn on X-axis mirror and start laying out my aircraft. So that is working with someone else's model. You fall prey to their modeling abilities and the way that they've set up their model. If you do your own model, you can know what you're going to have to do. You can cut out the surfaces that you need to control and that kind of thing. But if you're working with somebody else's model, you are subject to the way that they design the model themselves. Here in the wing, like I told you, I had actually cut out the aileron so that it would actually follow the path of the bone that I wanted to put in there. Anyway, that's pretty much my addendum to the how to rig a simple aircraft with a real world scenario and a little bit more complex model. So with that, I'm going to drop that down, bring up the other airplane, the one that I finished, let you have a final look at it. Okay, 7. Slight angle on the elevator bones to compensate for the actual angle in the pivot points on the elevators and on the flaps. See the angle? Slight angle on the rudder because its line is like this, and a slight offset on the propeller because they tried to scale the actual spinner to the actual real aircraft. Extra bones for the missiles and drop tanks, and other than that, the process that I used to rig the simple airplane. So with that, I'm going to say Private Jack out.